A 7,000-year-old clay head in Kuwait looks like an alien. Off the coast of Mexico, divers pulled up a jade artifact so precisely carved it seems too perfect to be real. And in Central Africa, a 24,000-year-old bone covered in notches might just be the world's oldest math tool, or something even stranger. These are ancient artifacts that look like they came from another planet. Up in northern Kuwait, archaeologists dug up this tiny clay head from about 7,000 years ago, which looks undoubtedly alien. It's got slanted eyes, the long skull, flat nose, very much like a reptilian type alien creature. The clay itself wasn't from around there, it came from Mesopotamia, so this figurine probably traveled with traders crossing the region. Another interesting thing is that this was found in a regular living space, not some temple or grave, so it was probably part of someone's everyday life, not just some fancy ritual type thing. And no one really knows exactly what it means, but back then some tribes used to wrap babies' heads to shape their skulls a certain way, so maybe this might be a depiction of that. Or, it could just be a sculpture of some ancient alien visitor. Off the coast of Veracruz, Mexico, divers found this small jade piece that looks kind of like a corncob from the future. It's got a cone on top and these perfect little square patterns all over it, carved out of jadeite, a stone that's way harder than steel. No machines, no drills, it was all carved by hand. Dates back to the Olmec era, and archaeologists think it was probably a ceremonial object. Maybe an ornament you'd find on a staff, or something used in rituals tied to corn, which was basically life for them. The fact that it was found underwater adds to the mystery though. Maybe it was an offering, or it was lost in a flood. The detail is crazy precise, so it almost looks like it could have been made by a machine, but no, it was just ancient craftsmanship. The Ishango Bone is a piece of prehistoric bone found near the border of Congo and Uganda, dated to about 24,000 years ago. What's interesting about this bone are the rows of notches carved into it. There are 3 columns of marks that seem way too organized to be random scratches. Some researchers think these marks might represent early math, simple counting, almost like a super ancient calculator or record-keeping tool. This would mean that tens of thousands of years ago, humans were thinking about numbers and patterns more deeply than we typically attribute to them. Way before writing or advanced civilizations, people were already tracking stuff and maybe even doing simple math. There's still debate about what exactly the marks mean, but the Ishango Bone pushes back how early we think math started. In Colombia's Quimbaya region, archaeologists discovered these small gold figurines that look surprisingly like tiny airplanes. The pieces have shapes that look a lot like wings, tail fins, and a body that looks like a plane's fuselage, stuff that made some people jump to the conclusion that they were proof of ancient alien technology. The artifacts date from between 200 and 900 the years, and they come from the Quimbaya culture, which was famous for their incredible metalworking. But most archaeologists think these shapes aren't planes at all. Instead, they're probably meant to be animals like birds, fish, or insects, creatures that were important in their mythology. The shapes might be stylized or a bit abstract, which can look like modern machines to us, but had a totally different meaning back then. But hey, you never know. What is undeniable though is the craftsmanship. These tiny figures are so nicely detailed, made from gold so pure it's still shiny after more than 1,000 years. The Ica Stones are a bunch of rocks from Peru covered with carvings that show some very strange things, like humans and dinosaurs hanging out together, people doing complex surgeries with advanced tools, and this guy riding around on a giant bird or pterodactyl. They're pretty incredible, but most experts say these stones aren't actually ancient, that they were probably carved sometime in the 1940s by locals trying to make a quick buck selling mysterious ancient artifacts to tourists. Obviously, the content of the carvings doesn't match what we know about prehistoric times, and there is zero proof they come from the distant past. Even still, the stones have become super popular with conspiracy theorists who want to believe that the Flintstones was historically accurate. Hey, I do too. The Dropa Stones are one of those artifacts that sound a little too weird to be real, which is probably why they've become such a legend in ancient alien circles. Story goes like this. In the 1930s, a group of Chinese archaeologists were exploring caves high in the Bayan Mountains of Tibet and supposedly found a bunch of stone discs, about a foot across, each carved with spiral grooves. In total, there were said to be 12 of these things. The markings, once decoded, told the story of a spaceship that crash-landed 12,000 years before. The beings inside were called the Dropa, and they couldn't return home, so they settled in the mountains. The tale blew up in UFO communities, and the stones have been referenced ever since. Now, the thing is, there's no confirmed location for the stones, no major museum has them, and it's led most researchers to call this a hoax. But the idea still floats around because with anything like this, there's always the slim chance that it could be real. Back in 1961, a group of rock collectors in Olancha, California found something weird. They cracked open what looked like a geode, a natural rock formation that usually takes thousands or even millions of years to form, but inside they found what looked like a metal cylinder with a coil and a ceramic piece. So people were pretty blown away by this. Some claimed it was an ancient electrical component, maybe proof of lost technology. Others said the rock around it had to be hundreds of thousands of years old. Well, it turns out, once it was inspected more closely, it wasn't ancient. The object was actually a 1920s era Champion spark plug, the kind used in early cars and tractors. The rock wasn't really a geode either. It was a chunk of hardened clay and mineral buildup, which can form around stuff way faster than you'd think under very specific conditions. That didn't stop people from calling it a fossilized machine part, or the Coso Artifact as it's come to be known, really running with the idea that it proved time travel, aliens, or some sort of secret civilization once existed. There's a temple in Abydos, Egypt, where the walls have some carvings that at first glance look suspiciously modern, or even futuristic. Some swear you can make out what looks like a helicopter, a tank, what looks like a submarine maybe. Now, these aren't faint outlines, they're surprisingly detailed. So naturally, these carvings have been brought up for decades when it comes to ancient alien conspiracies. Proof that Egyptians saw flying machines, time travel, long-lost technology. Well, I'd really like to believe all that stuff, but this explanation is more likely, less dramatic, but interesting all the same. Ancient Egyptian temples would get reused and recarved over time. So new pharaohs would come in, they'd want their own stories on the wall, so they would plaster over the old stuff and carve their own. And over time, the plaster wears off, and now you've got two sets of carvings overlapping each other, creating weird mashups that end up looking like helicopters or spaceships. Deep in the Colombian Amazon, inside the Serrana de la Lendosa cave system, there are cave paintings that go back over 12,000 years, and some of them are pretty weird. Some of the figures look like animals, some look like humans, and some are these strange in-between things. They've got human legs with animal heads or bodies with limbs that seem too long or distorted. They're called Therianthropes, half human, half animal beings, and they're scattered all across the wall. Some think they look extraterrestrial, at the very least otherworldly, but archaeologists think they're mythological, not depictions of space aliens. I guess they'd be animorphs. Or animorphs? They're aliens from space, right? And they could be like half human, half animal. Anyway, maybe they're shamans in animal masks or spiritual beings. It's also possible they were drawn while under the influence of some hallucinogenic plants, which some tribes still use in rituals to this day. The paintings are massive in scale, too, stretching across cliff faces, and the level of detail is nuts considering how old they are. Back in the 1930s, someone found a weird-looking rock near a creek in London, Texas. When they broke it open, there was a small hammer sealed inside. The head was made of iron, and the handle looked like it had started turning to stone. The rock around it looked ancient, which made some people think the hammer itself had to be millions of years old. That's what kicked off all the mystery. Some people claim this was proof of lost technology, that humans existed way earlier than we thought and were already making tools. Carl Bau, a creationist, claimed it came from before the biblical flood, but scientists and skeptics think there's a much simpler explanation here, that the hammer looks just like the ones used in the late 1800s for mining, and the rock around it is probably just a concretion, a natural process where minerals and water slowly build up around an object. It doesn't take millions of years. It can happen in decades, again, under the right conditions. Still, it's one of those finds people keep bringing up in conversations about ancient civilizations, time travel, and out-of-place artifacts, including me. With all that said though, I've been your host James, and I'll catch you, yes you specifically, in the next video.